Welcome back. Now, navigating through the mess at South African Airways is akin, some might say, to an obstacle course with snakes and crocodiles. Here's the latest turn. SAA owes aircraft leasing companies, I read, around 30 billion rand. The screws are turning on the carrier. It owes aircraft leasing companies 30 billion rand. Lessors want about 1.7 billion rand paid soon, by August. The debt had already piled up before SAA went into voluntary business rescue in 2019. Let's try and scythe our way through that. The editor of the respected trade magazine SA Flyer, Guy Leitch, good afternoon to you and welcome. So help me understand this. Again, cap in hand, the carrier is going to government for this payout. Would that be over and above the 10 billion that has already been received?
Hi, Jeremy. Well, depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. The business rescue practitioners insist that that's not in fact the case, that 1.7 billion is in fact already included in the 10.4 billion, or actually 3 billion, that they had asked for and had approved, but which still has largely not been paid. However, the problem is that the government, the DPE, had already spent a whole chunk of it in ways that hadn't been authorized by the business rescue process, specifically on Mango and SAA Technical, which had kind of sucked the money up and left none for the payment of the leases later on. And that's why they're now asking for additional funds.
So that 1.7 billion that's payable by the end of August, does that money, is it still around?
Is it still around?
Yeah, is it in the bank account?
Well, no. In fact, it doesn't even seem to be in Tito Mbowene's bank account, judging by his extreme reluctance to honour any of the commitments made by Pravin Gordhan in terms of keeping the airline alive. As we know, there's huge payments that aren't being made that were promised, particularly to staff, particularly to those who've accepted the voluntary severance packages. So I should imagine that a payment coming up later down the line, still 6 months away, is kind of the last thing on their minds.
If there's a default on this money paid to the lessors, what happens?
Yeah, that is a hydrogen bomb of a question. Because in theory, and we know, and I've seen the memo originally, that reminds everyone that there are cross-default clauses with all the rest of the major state expenditures. So suddenly, what in my calculation was 50 billion rands worth of exposure to SAA's leases suddenly becomes at least 10 times bigger. Let's pick a number of 500 billion just for round numbers. In terms of government's debt to other institutions, for instance, for Eskom. And I think that this is really very interesting because SAA finds itself in an incredibly bad position right now. I was full of praise for SAA 5-6 months ago when they were busy handing back the aircraft. I thought, boy, they've done well. They must have managed some incredibly tough negotiations with the lessors to settle the leases and thus hand back the aircraft. This now seems to be that the worst of all possible worlds. They have handed back the aircraft, and yet they still have the leases. So now they don't even have aircraft to restart the airline.
Talking of which, what happened to that January restart that was promised?
Well, yeah, to be honest with you, this one I don't blame SAA for. I think it was always going to be optimistic. And the news has gone from bad to worse on the length of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we're now hopefully through the second wave, but there's real talk of a third wave. The rollout of the vaccine program has been slower than hoped around the world, and it's been particularly bad in South Africa. And of course, then we had the South African variant of the disease. All of this has set back any plans to restore SAA to the air, at this stage internationally until October. And even then, I don't see that happening. There are way too many requirements that will have to be met before the airline can get back in the air. Not just the need to get new aircraft, which is going to be another 30 billion rand, conservatively, that they haven't budgeted for, but they've got to replace all the staff that have left, including what are called post holders. These are key positions required by the Civil Aviation Authority to make the airline run profitably. None of these people are in place at this stage. They've got a long way to go.